made $1 million a month. Why don't I feel happy? Why don't I feel joy? Why don't I feel fulfilled? Is like finding that next level of purpose so we can actually create more alignment in your life. We all have met the depressed multimillionaire, 40s, 50s, and still chasing external validation. 90% of our life is run by our subconscious mind. All of these automatic patterns, habits, beliefs, emotions. If you want to like shift your reality, you have to shift your subconscious mind and reprogram some of this hardware. So many of these quote unquote spiritual people are struggling paycheck to paycheck. One of the most spiritual things that you can do is get rich as fuck. With those resources, you're able to impact more people. The most powerful skill for any man to learn is how to manage and control your sexual energy. What is it that you do reminding people who the fuck they are? People might ask Tanner, like, who are you? You can lead with all of this, but at the end of the day, that's not who you are.
This was a while back, but I read it back in 2014, you said you got fired from your job and you found out your girlfriend at the time was essentially cheating on you. Like, how did that impact your life? Because it seemed like a very pivotal point for you.
Thanks
right?
for bringing that up. That's a beautiful way to start my Saturday. No, I'm just kidding. I was perfect. Yeah. University of Oregon is where I went to school.
Okay.
I graduated with a degree in sports marketing and business.
Right.
And my dream as a kid was to either be a GM of a pro sports team or play some pivotal role in that process.
Right.
And out of college, I actually landed a couple dope jobs. I was working for Stanford's athletic department and then also the Oakland A's.
Wow. So
one day, it was early August 2014, I got suddenly fired from the Oakland A's. I was crushing it. We can go into the story. It's not that important, but I'm happy to talk about it. And then literally, like, I called up, you know, other than my dad, my girl at the time was like, the only person I could really kind of like express those types of things to and like feel some level of compassion. And she just like wasn't picking up. So I went to visit her at work and she was like just with another dude. And I was like, yo, what the fuck?
At work?
Yeah, like at her work. And during that time, like there were moments where one of her exes somehow got my contact info and was basically saying like, yo, you need to watch out for her. She's like a hoe. She's going to betray you, all this shit. And I was like, bro, you're just bitter. You know?
Yeah, you're the ex-boyfriend.
And then, yeah, so that manifested. I was 23 at the time. Wow. And I was basically just reflecting on my life, bro. And I was like, there's nothing really keeping me here in California. Like none of my friends from high school are really doing anything meaningful. They're all just still like smoking blunts, playing N64, talking about meaningless shit till like 3 a.m. And I don't have this relationship. I was like, this is the time to step into the unknown and just try something different. So I drove cross country in my Honda CR-V at the time to South Florida. And I didn't really have a plan, but I kind of just surrendered. And fast forward basically a decade later, dude, and I'm still in South Florida. And there's just been so many pivotal points on that journey where I was like, yo, there's no way I'm going to fucking make it, you know? And at the end of the day, I think that was one of the first experiences where I was really faced with significant adversity. And I was like, okay, I can either play a victim and just be like, woe is me, my life's shitty, and just like be in that energy, or I can actually be proactive and do something about it and transmute the pain into something positive. So that's what I chose to do.
What's the main thing you would say you focus on? Like, so obviously when we'll look at your stuff, I'll see plant medicine, I'll see fitness, but like if someone's asking, you know, hey, what's the main offer Jeremy sells? Like what's the main focus for you currently? Or maybe even how did you work into that? So you started in fitness, then you kind of laid into plant medicine. Like walk me through that.
Up until 2019, I was a personal trainer in Miami. So like all of my income was directly connected to me needing to be physically present, training a client. Now, I built a very good reputation. I was working with pro athletes, entrepreneurs. So I was charging, you know, $200, $250 an hour, which is good for a trainer. But at the end of the day, it's like, even if I train 4 clients a day, $1,000 a day, like, first of all, that's exhausting energetically.
Yeah, of course.
And second of all, it's not scalable.
No.
As you know. So I had this moment basically where I was traveling abroad And I realized, oh shit, like I'm spending money while I'm here, but I'm bringing in $0. And I have all of these skills that I'm not even monetizing. You know, at this point, I sat with ayahuasca and I like built a deeper spiritual connection, you know, breath work, Wim Hof breathing, ice baths, like all of that stuff I was starting to step into. But at the same time, I was only charging people for training. So early 2020, literally 2 months, 3 months before COVID, I was like, I need to somehow package all of my knowledge and wisdom into an offer. And I'll never forget it, bro. Like the first online client that I got was this guy, Aiden Morin from LinkedIn. And it was a $3,500 offer for 12 weeks. He was based in Australia. Like I sent him a package to Australia, which cost like a few $100. But that was like the light bulb moment where I was like, oh shit, it's possible. There's a way to more financial abundance and freedom. So I continued kind of that trajectory as my online audience grew. I was like doing one-on-one stuff, a lot of high-level CEOs, entrepreneurs. And then at the end of 2021, I started sharing microdosing with them in addition to all the tools I was teaching, like mastering your morning routine, doing a lot of subconscious reprogramming, because 90% of our life is run by our subconscious mind. All of these automatic patterns, habits, beliefs, emotions that we're not even aware of.
Correct.
So if you want to like shift your reality, you have to shift your subconscious mind and reprogram some of this hardware, right? Because our brain's a supercomputer, but if it's operating with the outdated software, you're going to be settling for mediocrity. So it was really updating their life in all capacities from a 360 approach, like their nutrition, their gut health, their hormones, their brain. And really just when asking like, what is it that you do? Bro, I think it's reminding people who the fuck they are. Like people might ask Tanner, like, who are you? And it's like, you can lead with all of this, like all of this success you've created, right? Millions of dollars per month, right? But at the end of the day, that's not who you are. Like those are some really dope things you've accomplished, right? But it's not your identity. And if it is your identity, then it's going to create a lot of issues down the road when it's like realizing there's way more than just the financial abundance aspect, which I think you've experienced in your journey.
Yeah, I have. I mean, for me, I remember my goal was to hit $1 million in a month. It took me 18 months to get there. I was working probably, every second of every day. And then I hit it. And I remember that people just weren't as excited as I thought they'd be. When I hit it, I had this little party at my place and people were like, oh, cool. Like, you know, some people brought randoms and they're like, oh, you're Tanner, cool. Like, what's the party for? I was like, oh, yeah, I just hit $1 million a month in my business, da-da-da. And they're like, oh, cool. And then that was it. I'm like, bro, do you like have any idea like what I had to sacrifice to do that? Like you have like they're just clueless, right? They have no idea how hard it is to do that. And then I remember thinking if I hit that milestone, which most people will never do, and no one gave a shit about that, I'm like, well, then they're probably not going to give a shit about like any of these other people. Like, you know, there's probably someone who doesn't know who Oprah Winfrey is, or I don't know, maybe there's someone out there who doesn't know who Jeff Bezos is. Who knows? But like in the grand scheme of the world, there's probably somebody. It's funny, like poor people will probably think money will make a difference, but it's like rich people are the ones who find out it doesn't, you know?
Yeah.
So I had to go through that the hard way, I guess. And now I think I've realigned where I just do what I do because I love it. And I try to stay focused on that. And I try to stay focused on the inputs and not really worry about the outputs because I know the outputs won't matter when I hit it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a hard time for me because I you know, like obviously I cared or I want to put all that time and energy. And then when I got there, it didn't mean as much as I thought. And that bothered me. It bothered me that it didn't feel as good as I thought it would feel.
How old were you when that happened?
28 maybe?
Okay.
28, 29? Yeah, 28, 29.
I think that's perfectly normal for a dude in his 20s, even 30s, to be chasing external validation.
Right.
Where it's like, yo, I did this really dope thing. Like, where's the love, you know? And at the end of the day, I think a lot of people go on that journey and we're chasing things for the wrong reasons. Maybe it's out of scarcity. Maybe it's out of certain insecurities, childhood traumas, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to face yourself at some point in life. Like you're going to have to sit in the darkness and be like, yo, I made $1 million a month. Like, why don't I feel happy? Why don't I feel joy? Why don't I feel fulfilled? And that's kind of the work that I do, is like finding that next level of purpose so we can actually create more alignment in your life. You know, and we all have met, especially living in Miami, the depressed multimillionaire who's like 40s, 50s, and still chasing external validation, you know, and lacking real authentic connections and friendships. And that's just not a place I'm interested in being, bro, you know? But I also think it's possible to create that financial abundance and be rich in all the other areas of life. I think another narrative that a lot of us grow up with is like, if I'm going to chase money and like be wealthy, it's going to come at the expense of my health,
right,
of my relationships, of all of these other things, when that's just simply not true. Like, you're jacked as fuck. You see it. Like, the more healthy you are, the better food you eat, the more you get outside and feel the sun kiss your face, like the more energy you have, the more likely you are to fucking create success in every other aspect of life. You're going to have more focus and discipline for your business stuff and everything in that area and realm. So coming back to it, bro, I think it's all just getting out of here, reconnecting to like our intuition and to our heart, not on like some really deep spiritual shit, but just understanding that you have a specific purpose and calling here. And that's what you get to infuse into your business with your clients, with your team, is like that Tanner sauce, like that Tanner swag. And we're just meeting, so I'm not sure exactly what that is yet, but I'm sure I'll get to know it. But for me, it's like just being authentic as fuck and just being like fun and goofy and like not being afraid to just express myself unapologetically. That's what I'm stepping into in this next level for me. And I'm realizing in that process that it's going to trigger a lot of people, but it's also going to attract the people that are meant to be in your circle, whether that's online, like with followers and social media, and in person. Like, who are the people that are really seeing you fully for who you are?
To you, what is the meaning of life?
I think the meaning of life is recognizing your unique gifts, your unique skills, your unique qualities, and being courageous enough to share them with the world, despite the judgment you're going to get, despite the criticism, despite people talking shit. Like, having the courage to identify what makes you special and then fully stepping into that energy from a level of service, from a level of purpose, from a level of like, I want to make the world a better place. And I know that my unique gifts can do that. And it's being courageous enough to step into that every single day, even when you don't feel like it.
Yeah. What would you say to, because there's a couple different trains of thought that I've gone down. When I was going down this path, I think first I was like, well, you know, I don't feel super happy or fulfilled. Like, maybe I need to figure that out, and maybe that's a problem, right? Then I think I went to the other side, which was more nihilistic, which is, well, nothing really matters. So like, why does it matter if I'm happy or not? Da, 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 da. Then you also have like the religious perspective, right? Which that's, I think, where a lot of people, which I'm not against religion or anything like that. I just think that's where a lot of people try to reach for meaning. Cause it's like, you know, that's kind of like, maybe, I don't want to say it's man's explanation for like explaining stuff, but it makes sense. Like, if you have a religious stance on stuff, then it explains more things, right? It's like, oh, well, the purpose of life is this and that. So I think where I settled was, I'm not super religious currently. I'm not against, like, I'm not saying God's not real or anything like that. I just wouldn't say I'm like super religious. I don't really grasp or hold on to like certain practices, I would say, as of now. The nihilistic approach actually at the time did help me more, because I was like, okay, like, so maybe if I'm not happy, nothing's wrong with me. Like, maybe like, versus like creating a problem. Then as I went through more mindset training or I hired other people, I think the main thing that I learned, and like different people will talk about this, like Joe Dispenza kind of hits on it. The guy I worked with, Steve Hardison. But essentially, in short, they were like, what I learned at least was you create your reality. So if you want a different outcome, you have to create it. And part of the way I was able to do that is we worked on what we call a document, which like some people say affirmations, but I don't know. Affirmations to me doesn't at least have the right context, but we called it a document. What I did is talking about what you said earlier. You said your subconscious thoughts. So he was like, he's like, if you want to change your reality, you have to change, how you think. And I'm like, when he first said that, I was like, that makes literally no sense. Right. So you're telling me like, if someone punches me in the face, I need to think something different. He's like, no, like technically you wouldn't unless you've already pre-planned it. I was like, how would I pre-plan it? And so long story short, he's like, the way he helped me do the exercise, he said, write down everything you hate about yourself or hate about your life. Then I wrote the opposite. And what I started doing was saying those on a daily basis. And what I realized over time is the reason you say it on the daily basis is because as you say it on a daily basis, when you get in those difficult situations, that thought is what comes to your subconscious mind, which then makes it conscious.
Right.
That's at least how I interpret it. And so that to me actually has been the most helpful, because I feel like I'm in control versus before. And I think people are a reflection of you. So in the past, if I said, I want someone to show me love and no one does, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, why can't anyone show me love? But the issue is because I'm not showing love, right? So as soon as I show love, I get love. If I show respect, I get respect. Even when I have issues with people, it's usually like after I look at the situation, I'm like, fuck me. Like if I just handled it differently, then they would have reacted differently, right? Versus before I'd say, oh, there's something wrong with this guy or whatever. I guess with that context, what are your thoughts on that? Like, where do you fall on that spectrum? Because some people I think either fall into religion, so they're just like, oh, that's this is the purpose of life. Some people are more nihilistic, which is like, there's really no meaning to life at all, so it doesn't really fucking matter, so don't worry about it. And then I don't know where you would categorize what I just talked about with that, but that to me is like, that to me has been the closest I've felt to something godlike versus the other stuff, because it makes sense. Like if you're saying there's some entity or God out there who created man in his image, that to me is where I felt the closest to that, because if you're able to create shit or things, that to me is like godlike, right? That's at least how I view it. I don't know.
I think at the end of the day, it's a blend of both. Like there's no debating that regardless if you're religious, spiritual, whatever, we're all spiritual beings who are put here to create something, right? We literally, as men, have the ability to create life with our life force energy, right? Like with bodily fluids. That's fucking wild.
Yeah,
that's
when you
crazy.
think about it, actually is.
So as humans, we are here to create. And that can be creating life. It can be creating music. It can be creating art. It can be creating businesses. It can be creating your most athletic expression as an athlete. But what's happened in our society, bro, is we're addicted to consuming. We're addicted to consuming material things, and also just on social media. Like how often do we just fucking watch what other people are doing on their Instagram story, and it's all of a sudden like diminishing what we're doing in our life. And that ultimately is the way to be really disconnected from God, purpose, creating, is to be in that constant cycle of consumption. Like I was literally, bro, I was in Italy a couple of weeks ago. I was telling you, at this just most beautiful place, Lake Como, just experiencing all of this magic on this boat. And there's a couple people on the boat that are literally like watching other people's stories on Instagram. And I'm just mind boggled by this. I'm like, do you understand your reality right now? Like how fucking beautiful your life is, but you're not even going to fully be able to appreciate it because you're too busy watching someone else's life. And that ultimately, I think, is going to be the biggest regret of our generation is, wow, I wish I didn't spend so much time and energy watching other people live their life instead of creating my own. Yeah. So that didn't really completely answer your question. I think there's a duality between it's all about frameworks. Like you're friends with Alex Hormozy, I know. I checked out some of your conversation with him. And Hormozy's always saying like, you're gonna be dead. Everyone's gonna forget about you. Like, stop overthinking shit. And I think that's really liberating when you think about the fact that like one day you're gonna die and nobody's gonna care, essentially. And on the other side of the spectrum, it's like, bro, you were put here for a divine purpose and reason. You have an obligation to step into that. You have an obligation to become the best version of yourself so you can make the biggest contribution to humanity. So I think both of those narratives can coexist. And if we can kind of navigate both of those stories, I think it can really serve us, because then we'll be inspired to just constantly show up in the most powerful way every day, but also not worry so much about the opinions of other people, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
Have you read the book called The Mastery of Love? Have you read that book?
Yeah, Don Miguel Ruiz.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I
that
saw you
book,
had 4 agreements.
That
there.
book explains it. Again, it's like it explains it in a way where like I think part of what that book's talking about is talking about love, but it's the same type of premise. Like it's the same type of premise that I've learned. So the question is, where do you find the balance between going after stuff you want and then being happy with where you are? So for example, part of the book of Mastery of Love is, hey, you can love yourself, right? You don't need love from other people. And that's part of the problem, because it talks about like, if you woke up every day and you had a feast at your house, you wouldn't go to the door and someone offers you a pizza and they're like, oh, well, I'll give you this pizza if you do these things. You'd be like, well, that's stupid.
Exactly.
But there's also parts of us, I think, where, for example, if you want to pursue a woman, or you want to make X amount of money, or you want a car. And so I think something I'm still trying to learn is, where is the balance on that, where it's not bad per se, right? But it's like, if you know that you don't like, it's almost funny because I know this won't make me happy, but I still want it. And there's still benefits. I wouldn't say maybe a woman makes you happy, but there's benefits to being in a relationship. Or I don't think making this much money is going to like be the end all be all, but there's benefits to it. I guess like I'm curious on your thought process on where that line is, or how to handle those things, because I do think there is a balance. I don't think the best life is, oh, well, if I love myself, then I don't need anyone or anything or to do anything. Like that's almost maybe like where I feel monks are, which is not bad. But then I think, I don't know if I want to live that way. I'm kind of looking for a balance maybe, or.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess, does that question make sense?
For sure,
where do you figure that balance?
I think, first of all, you were already practicing like the manifestation, thoughts become your reality without even really recognizing it.
Maybe.
You were just doing it in like, and again, I don't know all the details, but I think you're just doing it in like a more fucking head down, I'm going to do it by any means necessary.
That was very much what it was.
It wasn't like I'm going to manifest $1 million a month.
At
like,
all.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, it wasn't necessarily infusing like a spiritual aspect, but at the same time, there's nothing wrong with that. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And I would argue that because I consider myself part of the spiritual community, but bro, a lot of spiritual people are also fucking broke.
No, and that was always my problem, because I think I would only see the 20% or the 80%, but there's actually the 20%. Like when I talked to Steve's worth, 200, 300 million, maybe more. And I was like, okay, I can listen to this guy. And I'm not saying they have to be worth that much, but it's hard, to your point, it was hard for me to take some people seriously, because I'm going, you're telling me the way I'm living is wrong, but you're not even in a position I want to be in. So it was hard to listen.
I see this a lot in the spiritual community in Miami. So many of these quote unquote spiritual people are struggling paycheck to paycheck. And I think that one of the most spiritual things that you can do is get rich as fuck, because with those resources, you're able to impact more people.
Sure.
And I believe like if you're truly deeply connected spiritually, then you understand, hey, the reason I'm here, my purpose is to elevate the consciousness of humanity in some way, right? And when you're more financially abundant, you can do that. And that's why for me, it's like, it always comes back to, it's not or, right? There has to be a blend of these things. And right? And it's like, if we can kind of find that healthy balance, then I think we can be in a really cool place. And then when it comes to material things, I personally grew up in, like, my dad became a brain doctor. They both grew up pretty modest, like pretty poor. And they didn't have much money growing up. And then when my dad started to accumulate money as a doctor, they maintained that same frugal mindset with money. So, like, we had a Mazda MPV, we had a Honda CRV. Like, we rarely ate out. If we did, it was at like Chili's, Red Robin. Right. That's kind of the house I grew up in. Like, my dad would buy anything regarding to my growth or education, but like, I maintained that same mindset of frugality with money, and I would like struggle to treat myself to anything.
Right.
So now in the space that I'm in, and I'm nowhere like near, I'm not at your level where the numbers you're doing financially, and I'm still in a better place than I've ever been. And occasionally I do like to treat myself to something that's more material, right? But it's because I fucking like it, right? It's not because I'm attached to this thing or impressing anyone with it. It's simply like, this is going to enrich my life in some way. You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of times we buy shit, especially in Miami, bro. It's like, who can flex the hardest with their whip, with their fucking clothes, with their condo, with their whatever. And at the end of the day, bro, like, that shit, it's cool to have and be able to share it with the people you love. But if it's constantly just being used as leverage to flex.
So I went 0 to $1 million a month, 18 months, started buying a bunch of shit.
Wait, you went 0? Like, you were making like $0?
Zero. Yeah. That's where most of this hardware came from. Yeah. So
that's crazy.
So, but I just want to be clear, like, all I did was work. Like, there was 0 girls, 0 date. I mean, it was actually like, it was a miserable existence, but I didn't give a fuck at that point. So when I got there, I started buying, I got a Lambo SVJ, you know, car's worth, I don't know, $1 million something now. I was living at 1000 Museum, which is right across here. You can't see it right now, but spending 25, 30 racks a month, dating anyone I could find, you know, it's just, and I went super hard that direction. And then it was ironic because one of my buddies said, dude, you built all this freedom. And there's just other stuff I think I was trying to fill a void. But he's like, you built all this freedom or money to have freedom. And now you're giving all your freedom away by buying shit. And like, so to each their own. But for me, what I realized, I said, I mean, I got cars and I was like, after 6 months, I was sick of it. And I'd get like a super outrageous place that like I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have all these parties and people are like, I never did. And then I would feel bad if I didn't use it because I grew up in, I would say, modest income. Like, my dad was a teacher. And so it was funny. So I started actually going the opposite way. And so now I have a lot of money, but I don't own anything. I like to rent. I don't like to buy. Anything I do buy, it's like investment type stuff. Like, I don't want to own the place I live because I want to get up and leave anytime. Like, I like that stuff. And so I think it's also another trap where the whole point for most people to get rich is to have freedom. And I'm not saying you can't own stuff, but then they give away all their freedom. And it's like, you know what I mean? And now they're a slave to this machine to keep making money to kind of pay for the things that they don't really care about. And it's just a flex. And then usually the people they're flexing on are not really people that you really want to impress, because the guys I want to impress are not impressed by that. The guys who are impressed by that are people I don't want to impress. They're usually people who don't have a lot, which is
a really important point, by the way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people miss that. And so I think, going back to what you said, if you want the car because you enjoy cars, that's perfect. If you want the car because you think it's going to get you something, or like you said, leverage, I think that's a totally wrong mindset. And I think it's a quick way to be miserable. And before he left, Brandon said something, the hedonistic treadmill. It's like, but that's in all things in life. Like, anything you buy or anyone you meet or like any relationship you're in, there's that initial, oh my gosh, this is new. And it all fades. It doesn't matter what it is. It all fades. So house, cars, etc., that eventually fades. And so then you have a choice. You either learn to just like, okay, like, I don't really need more, or B, you just always are getting more. And I just feel it's a game I don't want to play. So I just went the opposite direction, where I'm like, hey, I'm cool with what I have. Like, if I want bigger stuff or stuff, I can, but it's not this thing that drives my entire life in existence, because I don't know, it just becomes this crutch where if you ever want to pivot, if you ever want to do other stuff, if you want to have more time to like not work, like you can't because you're like trying to put up this lifestyle. I don't know. It just seems like not a great way to live your life, in my opinion. And I think that's where you were going with it, right?
Yeah. When I was in Italy, you know, I was thinking about this a lot because I'm like, you know, there's people obviously making more money than me, but I was like, there's not so many people who could have their income completely not impacted and be traveling these last 2 months and like enjoying life. And also, of course, working while I'm traveling, but like really having amazing experiences. Like for me, that is like the new definition.
That's way better.
That's the new definition of wealth and freedom.
I agree.
Is yes, having the financial abundance, but also setting up your life in a way that you're not attached to all of these material things. So you can go and travel to Europe for the summer if you want. You can go visit your family for a couple weeks and not have your impact and income drastically diminished. And that for me, like, was a big divine download, I like to call it, like a divine download. And that's kind of, honestly, you were asking too, I think that's where some of the more spiritual practices come into play. When you get so used to something that's so dope, right? Like, which is very easy when you live in Miami Beach. You know, I was gone for 2 months. I was staying at, like, experiencing amazing places. I came back to my place in Miami Beach and I have like a view of the bay. I have a dope gym in my building. And I was like, yo, I'm fucking grateful, bro.
To have it.
It was sometimes a struggle to find a gym when I'm traveling that had the stuff I wanted. And like now I just have, you know, more comforts. Right. And I really appreciated those things. And I probably wouldn't have appreciated them as much if they weren't taken away.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we need to constantly like humble ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, and we can't allow ourselves to get too comfortable in our environment because at the end of the day, like, we're designed to grow and evolve every day.
Yeah.
And if we're not doing that, bro, we're slowly dying. And that's what I would argue is like when we feel empty or depressed or sad, at least for me, it's like this perceived lack of growth. Like I'm not becoming the version of myself that I know I'm capable of becoming. And for me, that is upsetting when I do feel like that. And that's why I'm like, yo, I need to change something. I need to elevate some area of my life so I do feel like I am progressing and evolving in some capacity. Yeah.
I think traveling always makes me appreciate Miami more. I'm sure, like, I still have other places to see, so maybe I was only in Dubai for a little bit, but I have yet to be in a city that I liked more. Maybe it's out there, but usually when I come back, I'm like, man, dude, it's clean here. Everything's new. It's nice. You know, I always am more grateful when I travel. Some people are like, say there's other places better in America. I don't know. Maybe it's Europe, because I haven't been to Europe. Like You've
never been to Europe?
Not really. I mean, like stints. Like I've been to Asia. I've been to South America a lot, so maybe that's where I'm missing. So it's like, hey, if I went to Europe, maybe like Spain or Italy, for example, would be places. But man, I'm the same way. When I come back to Miami, I'm very grateful for it because usually where I'm coming from, it's like older buildings are worn down. It's not as clean. There's just not. It's hard to access stuff, right? Like just simple stuff, or like getting a doctor's appointment, or I don't know. So that's an interesting take. I read as well, and I'm curious on this. You went a year without like any sex, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, that was during COVID. Yeah.
Yeah. So and does that include like no FAP everything, or is it just like women?
It was probably about 6 months no FAP, and then probably 11 months not having sex with anyone.
So one, what was the reason behind that, and two, like, did you learn anything from it? That's a pretty long time.
First of all, it was right before COVID started, and I was moving to this new place on the beach, and I was in the process of building my online business, so that was consuming a lot of my time. And then COVID happened, the lockdowns happened.
Yeah.
And it kind of just naturally forced myself to be in this cocoon where I was isolated. And I really, there's one day where I was like about to fucking just give in to instant gratification. And I was like, wait, dude, it's been like 6 weeks since you've busted a nut.
Yeah.
Like, maybe this is worth continuing. Like, you've created a lot of momentum in these 6 weeks. How much longer can you go? So it honestly, like, I caught myself in that moment, and then it kind of just naturally, dude, it wasn't even that challenging. I think at like 3 months, I wasn't like actively hitting up girls. The lockdowns were still in place, and I was honestly building a deeper connection with myself, because I would argue that the most powerful skill for any man to learn is how to manage and control your sexual energy.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because we all have it, especially if you're like an aspirational creator, entrepreneur, like you feel that energy, and it's so easy sometimes to distract yourself and to give into those quick hits of dopamine. But if you're able to like channel your breath and move that energy upwards and channel that energy to your purpose, channel it to your workouts, channel it to something productive, that is a fucking amazingly valuable skill to learn.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're really taught that, like, in
No,
our life.
yeah, and there's a lot of, I would say, with higher level entrepreneurs, at least for me, and maybe I just projected this, right? Talking about creating our realities, but I always felt like there's always very mixed advice with, I would say, usually with affluent males, meaning either they don't tell you the true story because it's very personal, right? Meaning what I'm referring to is like how to interact with women or how to handle relationships, right? So some, I feel like either A, they don't really give you a straight answer because it's very personal, it's private. It's like, hey, like, are you with one girl? Do you have a bunch of girls? Are you like this? Are you polyamory? Like, or B, okay, maybe you just cheat or do that, which that to me is like, I don't want to be that type of person. Or B, they'll say something like you deal with it, which is very interesting. I'm talking more in the context of relationship. I know you weren't in there, but I also find that's a very, it's almost like, feels like a very taboo topic. And I feel like there's not tons of advice around it unless it's more revolving around being in a long-term relationship, which is obviously what most people do. But if you're not at that point and you haven't met someone, I think that's where I struggled a lot, because I was making a lot of money at a very young age. I had a lot of opportunity. I'm over 6 foot, that's like half the girls that are like, oh, you're 6 foot. Okay,
Especially
check.
like the Latinas in Miami,
Yeah,
like 5
6 foot.
foot.
Yeah, you're 6 foot. You're 6 foot. You go to the gym. Okay, you make money. Good. So I wish there had been more stuff around that. And I wish it was like a little bit easier to talk about. The problem is, I understand why people don't, is because it's like, you don't want to have your business out there for people to know like what you are or aren't doing. But that's an interesting thing you did. I think learning how to handle that stuff is super important though, because it's probably the strongest urge we have as a man. Right? I mean, I'm trying to think, is there anything? I really think that's the strongest urge we have. So I think there's a lot of benefit to being able to control that for sure. Or at least be, yeah, I mean, control it, and then like know like how you want to use it or how you want to date or however that is. But I mean, I wish there had been more around that maybe when I grew up, because the only thing I really had was kind of religious stuff, which is more like guilt, shame type deal, which isn't, which I think anytime you're doing stuff out of like fear and obligation, it doesn't last because it's not what you really want to do.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a couple interesting things. Like,
Yeah.
So, I grew up Jewish, but I was never like I was never really religious. But I recently, last year or earlier this year, I took this class here in Miami Beach, and it was like a Jewish dating program.
Yeah.
Where it was like going over the principles, like how to attract the partner that you actually desire. Right? What qualities to look for? What are the values that you prioritize most in yourself?
Yeah.
Right? And one of the big things that they talk about is that in Judaism, they really emphasize dating to find your wife. So it's not dating to like have fun.
Right. It's very serious.
And I actually was talking and kind of like debating with the rabbi, because I was like, I totally understand that. And, the relationships that I've been in, I would argue, forced me to grow a lot. They taught me a lot of valuable lessons. So I wouldn't necessarily, those were like failed relationships.
Right.
I think they helped me gain more clarity on what I actually want to create.
Agree. Yeah.
Right. With like my future wife and like family and stuff like that. And I also do see that side of the spectrum where it's like, if you date and the intention is like, I'm dating to meet my life partner, you have such clear direction on like, hey, if this person just doesn't feel aligned with their values or energetically, like, I'm not going to give any more time or effort to it.
Yeah.
And it's a very liberating idea. And it's,
or at the very least, I think if you have that conversation, like if you meet a girl, I think this is where a lot of guys fail. You meet the girl and you know it's not going to go anywhere. You're just like, hey, look, you're great, whatever. I just want to be clear. Like, I don't see this going anywhere. But if like you want to hang out in the meantime or whatever, like I think a lot of guys don't like that because they're so controlled by their urge to have sex that they'll just tell the girl whatever she wants to hear to get that, even though they already know it. I think that's where shit goes south. Like as soon as you're starting to say stuff that you know ultimately is like not true and it's just a means to an end, usually to get sex, that's where I feel like it's never worth it, because it goes back to that book, The Mastery of Love. You can always find someone who's aligned with where you're at, either meaning A, they're okay with where you're at, so they're like, oh yeah, that's cool right now, or B, they think the same way as you, right? Versus you're trying to make someone think the way you do when they don't.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, and what you just described is probably the biggest thing that, like, the most mistakes that I made when it comes to relationships is not being super clear and honest up front, just like you said. Because
and it's hard though. It's
Exactly.
hard because it's hard to be honest with someone when you know that's not the answer they want to hear. But the longer I've lived, the more I realize that is always usually the reason for any issues I've had. Not even just in relationships with business, whatever, where you're just afraid to tell them the truth, versus like, you don't have to force people to change. Like, you just find someone who fits what you want, and that's it. And like, there's people out there who will fit it. And I think a lot of times we tell ourselves, maybe someone won't accept where I'm at, or maybe they'll judge me for it. Or it's like, I think it's a fear thing.
And in reality, it's whether it's a business partnership or an intimate relationship, usually, bro, if you're honest, the truth is always appreciated.
Oh, they respect you way more.
It might not be well received. It might be emotional. Someone might get pissed off in the moment, but from a integrity standpoint, it's definitely the move. And that's something that I've definitely slipped up on in the past, is like not being clear right away with those intentions.
Yeah.
And I'm doing my best to like not repeat those same mistakes.
Yeah. I think the other thing too, for any of the guys listening, is if you're not sure about your intentions, be upfront about that. Like, meaning, I'm not sure what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, like, especially when I was like in my early 20s or when I was in my teenagers, like, you're not looking to get married, right? And you're learning, right? You're learning, you're making mistakes. But I think if I could go back in time, stuff I would have done different is just been more upfront with my intentions and doing it in a loving way, where it's like, look, like, this and that. I just think what happens, especially with guys, is the end game for us is obviously we're attracted to women. We want the woman. And then we say what she wants to hear to get the sex or whatever. And then once that happens, that's where shit goes south, because it's like they eventually always get to the same bottom line, right? Like, they always find out, okay, so you didn't really like me, you just want this. I think you can avoid a lot of bullshit by just not falling into that trap. And I do think it is a trap. I wanted to go back. I wish I had done this before we transition. I want to go back a bit. We're talking a lot about creating their reality. For anyone listening, I thought most of this was massive bullshit before, until I started to get to learn about it from people who I could relate to, that were a little bit more logical, a little more factual, and just, to be quite frank, more successful. Do you have any books or places that you would recommend for people who are like, what are these guys talking about, to learn? Because, to be frank, if I had heard this a few years ago, I'd be like, this guy is so full of shit, makes no sense. I don't even know what they're talking about, right? But it's hard to explain until they know, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, I saw a couple books. I think you had 4 Agreements there by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah, I'm going through his whole thing right now, dude. I like The Mastery of Love was so good, and I want to keep going through it. That book really helped me. Like, it hit me at a very impactful time.
It's funny because like all of my clients, when they start, we send them out.
Is that what you said?
We send them a momentum package that has a bunch of cool resources in it, and that's the book we send them.
That's such a good book, dude.
Because
that's top 2 probably for me ever.
And it's so simple to read, bro. You read that in a day.
Yeah, 200 pages.
Like at the end of the day,
and the pages are like they're not very big, and the words are huge.
At the end of the day, regardless if you are super successful or not successful, super spiritual, not spiritual, like we all have childhood wounds and different traumas, some traumas bigger than others, that impact us as adults. And a lot of those traumas and emotional wounds stem from us not feeling loved as kids, right? And throughout our life, we're on this journey of like getting that external validation and love from other people and places, usually the wrong people and places. And until we recognize that it's coming from that space of lack, and we realize like, oh shit, like maybe I just need to do a little more work on myself to love myself unconditionally, then we start to actually heal the root cause. And this is actually like taking us, so a couple, dude, actually, this one, like fucking game changer. I've been reading this book.
What's it called?
It's called
listening?
7 Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra. And I've been, it's less than 100 pages. I've been reading this book. I've read it once a day, every day of September.
No shit.
Yeah. Like it's part of, I do it in my infrared sauna. And bro,
that's nice. I got one too.
Dude, it's got so many divine downloads. We can go over it. But going back to tying this into psychedelics and plant medicine, I think one of the most beautiful benefits of psychedelics and plant medicine is that they help you cultivate unconditional love for yourself.
Right.
They take you back to your years as like a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, and you realize like, man, I'm just a big ball of love that was just craving affection and attention. And if I didn't receive that love and attention, then I went elsewhere to try to feel the love. And like you're seeing people like Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, Aaron Rodgers, one of the best football players to ever play.
I saw that.
You're seeing people like Aaron Rodgers and other very successful entrepreneurs and athletes talk about the power of plant medicine and psychedelics for being able to remind them of that unconditional love for themselves. Because Aaron Rodgers was one of the best quarterbacks, won a couple MVPs, won a Super Bowl, but so much of his identity was attached to that,
right?
Was attached to being the athlete. And it wasn't really for just being himself. So what he talks about is like after using ayahuasca and mushrooms, he reconnected to that unconditional love and that energy where he loved himself more, and he showed up in a more powerful way as a teammate because he was giving that same amount of love and energy to everyone on his roster. And then he won back-to-back MVPs shortly thereafter. I think that's a huge reason why a lot of high-level leaders, entrepreneurs, athletes are leaning into psychedelics and plant medicine because they understand that it makes them a better leader. It helps cultivate more self-love, more compassion, more kindness. And when you're able to cultivate those qualities within yourself, you're able to give them to your clients, your customers, your team, and just show up in a more powerful way.
Yeah, I agree. I did it like all like within a month. I did ayahuasca, I did mushrooms, I did bofu, I did bofu was crazy. I did ibogaine all in a month. Yeah,
all in a month.
It was I wasn't supposed to, but I did. And I think if you're not ready, it's a big step for most people. To be frank with you, the reason I did it is I was in a desperate moment and I just like felt like I'd tried everything, and so I was like, fuck it. I think for someone listening, if you're trying to learn about creating your reality and how you have more control over your life, that Mastery of Love's a great book. Probably the other books. Who's the author again?
Deepak Chopra?
No. The Mastery of Love.
Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah. If you could start with his books and then read the Mastery of Love, and then I think from there what really helped me is I just had an actual mentor that could like kind of, there's another one, Self-Deception and Leadership by the Arbinger Institute. I think if someone read the Mastery of Love, dude, it's great. And it's the same thing, but it's in a business context. It's the same thing in a business context. I think if anyone is listening, if you can just start with Self-Deception and Leadership by the Arbinger Institute, the Mastery of Love, and then go through all the books by who wrote the Master.
Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah, go through all his books and then piece it together with a mentor, because that's what really helped me. Is then you start to see it over and over again in all the type of mindset trains. Like I'll see it with Joe Dispenza, I'll see it with Tony Robbins, I'll see it in different books now, because it's I don't even know how to explain it, but they're showing you how to kind of create your reality. And then when I also did the plant medicine with it, the whole point, that at least for me, the plant medicine really just takes away like all your, I mean, for me, it was like, it took away my ego is what it felt like, you know, and it the way I've always described it to people is it brought thoughts to my brain that I hadn't thought about before. It was very interesting. I think it's hard to put into words the experience unless someone's done it. But would you agree with that? Like, I guess I'm curious. I feel like it's hard to get people to go from zero to plant medicine. I feel like it's much easier to be like, hey, go to a book, go to a mentor, and then maybe go to that. Unless they're desperate. For me, I was desperate, so I think that's what got me over the edge. But I don't know if I would have gotten there unless I was.
Desperation is the best motivation.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely will push you to do some crazy shit or shit that maybe you're uncomfortable with. Yeah.
So for anyone who's listening and they're like, what is plant medicine? What is ayahuasca? What is mushrooms? Which I doubt is many people listening, honestly. Mm-hmm. Just because it's almost 2025, I feel like people are starting to be awakened to these types of things. Mm-hmm. First of all is breathing. Like, we get to microdose God every single time we breathe, which is 25,000 times a day. Like, when you take that inhale and you're inhaling that oxygen, you're oxygenating your blood, you're delivering that oxygen to your brain, like, you're filling yourself up with life force energy, which is reconnecting you to your divinity in the present moment, which is the best medicine. Mm-hmm. So I think before doing anything, before changing your diet, before trying mushrooms, ayahuasca, before anything else, is just having some sort of intentional breathing practice. It could be 5 minutes in the morning, right? And it can be very simple, very basic. It doesn't have to be so complicated. I do think psychedelics like mushrooms and ayahuasca can help expedite the process. Meaning,
yeah, I mean, if it almost like forces it, essentially. It's like when you take it, it's like you're going to feel something.
So
right?
the most important thing is if someone's going to do like a bigger dose experience of mushrooms, ayahuasca, different plant medicine, you need to find a guide that you fully trust and can feel safe with. Because just like everything, bro, there's a lot of fake shamans and spiritual gurus on the internet.
Right.
And I'm very clear with people. I am not a shaman. I'm not a healer. I'm none of those things. I'm just someone who's done a lot of inner work myself. And I feel like part of my purpose is to empower other people to safely implement these tools in a very safe way where they can let go, where they can surrender. But I think a big reason why so many people are hesitant to do mushrooms or ayahuasca is because they're scared to lose control. Yeah. And control is really just an illusion that we're attached to. We try to control every part of our life, bro, when in reality, there's very few things you actually have control over.
Yeah.
You control your habits, your actions. You can have control over your emotional regulation, the way you treat yourself, the way you treat others, right? But like, if you really try to live life controlling every aspect of your life, you're going to be fucking miserable. You're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to be overwhelmed with anxiety, and you're never actually going to be connected to the present moment. So it's like realizing that life actually gets way better when you're able to let go and relinquish some of that control. And same thing as an entrepreneur. It's really hard when you're building a team to like delegate a task to someone who you know probably isn't going to do it as good as you, but it's going to free up time for yourself. And it's the only way you're going to be able to scale and create more freedom is by surrendering control, you know? And if we hold too close to that idea of like, yo, I need to fucking control everything, bro, you're going to be fucking miserable. And it's when the biggest like light bulb moments in people is when I see them just like fully exhale and just allow themselves to relax, you know, into the breath. So I would obviously I would reach out to me because I'm pretty experienced in doing what we're doing and we've helped a lot of people. But there's so many good resources out there, like the books you recommended. But it's also just gaining clarity on what areas of your life you actually want to address. It's almost just doing like an analysis on your life, like taking inventory, doing an audit, like, hey, what's working for me? What's not working? And what are the biggest opportunities to improve with my health, with my wealth, with my relationships? And once you start to cultivate clarity in those areas, you have more intention as to why you're pursuing this path.
Yeah.
And then what's really cool is I love the definition in this book. We hear about the word intention a lot. And essentially the way I like to think about intention is it's your desire without attachment. So maybe when you were building your business, right, your intention, your goal was, I want to get this to $1 million a month. You were so attached probably to that outcome.
That's all I thought about.
But at the same time, which is amazing because you may have not got there if you weren't so obsessed with it. And
not that fast.
And like when you're setting intention, you don't want to be overly attached, because if you're overly attached, again, you're less open to like the different synchronicities and unexpected possibilities that might happen.
I think the key thing that I'm hearing in your words, and I wish I'd learned this sooner, is like you said, not to try to control stuff. For me, to be frank with you, a lot of my life, I feel like I did have a lot of control. So like football, sports, like, cause I'm like, hey, I work out, I run, I'm going to kick ass. Like, business, same thing. I think at least for me, and it may just be my roadblock or my thing that I have to work on, is like I've struggled more with relationships because it's two people. So it really, you really don't have that much control. Like if you're in a relationship, that person can choose to leave at any time. So you're kind of having to choose on a daily basis if you're going to be either friends with that person or in a relationship with that person. I think for me, what I had to really get to is realizing that I think a thought that's helped me is like, hey, no person should have control on your happiness or like how you feel. It's like you should make yourself happy. And then if that person fits, it's like the dog analogy I love in the Mastery of Love. It's like if you go to to buy a dog and you like black dogs and there's like a dog, this is, paraphrasing, but to me, the way I took it was like, I like black dogs and there's a brown dog, it's not like I'm trying to change the brown dog to be a black dog. I'm just like, yeah, you're great, but like, I like this type of dog. And then also being okay, like with who you are and where you're at, because if that person doesn't align, you're like, hey, you're great how you are. I'm great how I am. Like, if we don't agree on stuff, we're not a fit. And like, I think that was something that took me many, 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 many years to learn, because before you hear a lot of stuff where people say, well, relationships take work and you got to work on it and stuff. So I thought it's like, okay, so I got to get this person on my side of the end zone. And I think there's parts that like relationships do take work. You have to be forgiving and you have to help and but I think like, if there's like big stuff in life that you don't agree on, I think that is actually something that gets misstated a lot in relationships where they're like, oh, you need to work on that. I'm like, no, like if you want 6 kids and they want 0, you don't go to 3. It's like you go find someone who wants 6 kids and who doesn't want kids.
Right,
like that's, I don't know. That's at least how I viewed it. And I think that's the biggest part where I struggled, because I agree with what you're saying is like trying to control everything, I think is where we get in trouble, right? Versus we're happy with who we are. We're working on ourselves. And then especially in the context of love or relationships, it's like you let people flow to you or flow out that like don't fit where you're at and you're okay with it. But that's hard to be okay with it, I think, for most people, because they don't actually love themselves or they're not cool with who they are.
Relationships are tough. I'm curious. We can definitely dive deeper on, because one of the frustrating things for me is like in business and building relationships in that area, I really do my best to operate with a lot of kindness and compassion. Mm-hmm. And what I've realized is that it's very hard to find people who are operating at my level. And I'm not saying like I'm fucking amazing or like I'm like so extraordinary, but like, bro, the truth is most people are programmed to be employees. They're not programmed to be leaders.
Right.
They're not programmed to take initiative. They're not programmed to like find creative solutions to problems. Mm-hmm. They're basically programmed to do things that you tell them. And at this stage of my life, bro, I'm just really calling in leaders on my team who are like, yo, you're great at what you do, but I think there's this blind spot and I see this other opportunity that maybe you're unaware of. Like, that's really what I'm craving right now, is people who have that kind of same level of passion and curiosity. And it's hard. Like, it's hard, bro.
Yeah, no,
I don't know if you experienced that.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that's been a helpful thought for me is just understanding that really, if you think about anything in life where you're doing something that's not common, there's going to be resistance because most people aren't doing that. So I think what you're feeling is actually normal, because by definition, if you want to have an extraordinary life, you have to do more difficult things, which by definition, most people won't do. So therefore, you're going to feel more alone, I think. Like for example, even some of the stuff I've accomplished, most people will never do. So therefore, it's like trying to find more people who think the way I think is more difficult, right? And I don't think it's bad or good, but I think it's just being okay with that. Even in context of like relationships, just because we talked about it, a big thing I struggled with for a long time, because if you pull religion out of it, is like, if you have good intentions, you're like, well, what's the best way to have a relationship? Like, you know, some like Dan Bilzerian for a long time, I mean, he was like, had 8 million girlfriends. I don't think that's the best way per se, but like you have that, or you could have the guy who's with one woman the rest his whole life. That's like my dad, and my parents have a pretty good relationship. You have some guys who like have couple girlfriends, or like, I don't know. So I think by default, for example, is like, let's say you went off the normal path there, it can already be more difficult because most people aren't doing that, for example. So like I would say most people are like, you're dating one person, you know, you try to stick with them for as long as you can. So even like any thoughts outside of that, if like you're having thoughts like that, and just that's just in this context of the convo, like that can also be difficult. So I think in business, for example, if you want to make a lot of money, there's less people who want to do that. In a relationship, if you want to have something outside of like a long-term relationship, it's going to feel weird. I'm not saying that's a bad choice either. That could be right or wrong choice, but I think what you're feeling is actually normal.
Yeah.
Again, it's a different perspective. Like going to create your reality. If you think it's bad that you think differently, you're going to create a bad situation. If you think it's good, which to me, like I just learned to be more comfortable with it, because I think that's also what makes stuff worthwhile. Because if, for example, if you thought a certain way about a relationship, I don't know, whatever it may be, and then it took you twice as long to find someone who thinks the same way, isn't that when you're like, holy shit, like I made it? Versus like everyone agrees with you and then it doesn't mean as much to me.
Dude, it's so wild, because like I really, it was just my birthday a few days ago, and I was like, and I was just getting clear with my intentions and what I want to bring in. And Joe Dispenza has an amazing exercise, like I can show you after on that whiteboard. But it's really to align your intentions, and then your elevated emotions that you want to experience on a consistent basis. And I was really just calling in like elevated relationships where I'm not feeling like I'm the one always holding the weight.
Right.
And I always, and right. I actually, and this is,
and that's how it should feel. I keep going back to the Mastery of Love, but like to me, do you remember it was the guy who, you guys have to read it. If you haven't read it, you have to, but the guy who was saying love doesn't exist. Right. And then he met the girl who also said love didn't exist. And then they started like hanging out, and he's like, well, maybe love does exist. This is what love feels like. And it was just supernatural. Right. That's at least how I view it now. I don't know. That book was very helpful for me.
No, when I saw that, I was like, I was fucking No, I was juiced because I really do think it's those simple lessons that actually return us back to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, you know, a lot of the work that I do is helping people escape the prison of big pharma, big food, all of these systems that are designed to keep us playing small and to keep us sick and be on medications for the rest of our life, right? And the best way to help you break free from all of these broken systems is to help you love yourself unconditionally, because when you love yourself truly, you're not going to want to eat shitty food. You're not going to want to hang out with toxic people. You're only going to want to feed yourself the best quality things in all areas of life.
And by doing that, you naturally attract it, right? It's like why being clear on who you want to be is the most important thing, because when you're clear on what you want, the issue is when you're not clear with what you want. That's the hard part. And I think some people you have to give yourself grace when you're going through that. But as soon as you get clear on what you want, it's super easy to attract, because you're like, this is exactly where I'm going. And then you only do those things that feed into it. It's just
when it's out of alignment, it's like, no.
Yeah, you're not going to do it.
I have a question for you actually.
Yeah.
And from like a business standpoint, like how do you feel about, a lot of people are like, your 3-year plan, your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan. I talk to people who they're very into that mindset. And then I talk to other successful people who are like, bro, I don't have a 5-year plan because like up until now, things have not gone how I expected them to go. And I don't want to be like so rigid and attached to these certain outcomes. So it's like this combination of getting clarity with what you want to create in the future and also being open to co-creating with the universe and like having these different things happen unexpectedly.
I'm more of that mindset. And the reason is just what happened. I was like, I want to make a bunch of money. Built a multi-million-dollar fitness company. Then people started asking me to help build their fitness companies. That was not planned. I was just like, okay. So I started doing that. That blew up. Then more people started asking me. That blew up. Then I started adding portfolio companies. Now I own a couple tech companies and I made a tech company. Like, it just happens is how I view it. But I think like you have direction of the path you're going. But then as you start succeeding, it's like you're creating more opportunities that naturally come. So for example, like if I was able to meet Russell Brunson because I won a bunch of awards and I know people. So like maybe Russell's like, hey, do you want to speak on stage? Like it's not like I was like, I will speak on stage. I don't know. I think you can have those things, and I've definitely worked with mindset coaches who've had me plan that out. But I like to think it more as a guideline or something that I can look at. Like if I had like, let's say a dream board or something, and I can see that, I'm like, cool. Like that's in the back of my mind. But I don't think I think ultimately for me, I'm not, unless it's a very rigid goal. So it's like, I want to own the New York Yankees or whatever. I don't know. I think things do change, right? Like if I had a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan when I started, because I started 25, I'm 32 now. So I'm 7 years in. Like it just, I don't know. It just hasn't gone how I thought. Like I never thought I'd be where I'm at because it wasn't planned. Like I was just like, I am poor. I want to make a ton of money. I'm going to build a fitness company. That was the only thought I had. So I think there's benefits to both. And I think the point is like to try to make those thoughts more conscious so that you're if you're like, hey, here's where I'm going in 2 years. Here's where I'm going in 3 years. Then like, as you have those thoughts, the hope I'm assuming is you take more actions in relation to that. But I think we can't always plan the future, and so things change, right? It's like that's if someone divorces you, it's like, oh, I didn't plan on divorce, but now you pivot. So, for me personally, I guess I don't spend as much time on that because I know that as I continue to progress and make money, more opportunities will come. But I'm also not super rigid on where I go. Like I'm like, I want to sell a company for 9 figures, but I don't really care what the company is. It's more because I know what type of person I'll have to become to do that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so
of course.
I definitely, I agree with you. You could do either way, but I'm more just, hey, here's kind of the direction I'm going. And then things have changed so much that I don't try to just, okay, it has to be like this and it has to be like that, because I think then you could miss opportunities that come along. I think it's good to be open-minded.
This book, I love how they define success. It says, success is measured by how efficiently, how effortlessly we co-create with the universe. So for me, it is basically saying, like, work hard, be very clear with your desires and intentions, and also don't try to force everything. Be open to unexpected synchronicities, right? Because when you really put that intention out there, like, different forces energetically will conspire to support you in that vision. And I think that is kind of supporting what you were just saying right now, where it's like, it's kind of being super clear and also being open to like these unexpected pivots.
Yeah, last thing I'll say on it is like, more so what I was taught and what I've learned is like, focus on who you want to be. So for example, if I want to be a billionaire, what traits would the billionaire have? And then I focus on those traits. And by focusing on those traits, those things will happen. Like, for example, if someone wants to be a billionaire, what would a billionaire probably have? Well, he probably fucking works hard. All right, common sense. Like, he probably tells the truth, hopefully, right? He probably is super dedicated. He's probably kind to people, or at least the one I want to be. Like, I don't want to be an asshole billionaire, right? So if I'm focusing on those things, then the goal is when I get in certain situations, if I'm like, hey, I'm a strong, powerful leader, people love working for me because I put them before myself. Then like as you get in those situations, the hope is that that thought becomes conscious and you change how you act, which then starts creating that shit.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of how I view it. So instead of focusing so much on, I want to get a car and I want to get this, which is external, you're focusing on the internal change, which then gives you those external things.
Yeah.
Right. And because I think you can get really lost in the sauce with that versus just focusing on you, which then will create those things. Right. Because, for example, if I put my employees before myself, they'll love working for me. If they love working for me, they'll make more money. If I make more money, I will get the fucking car. Right. So I feel like that's where people get lost, is they're over here versus here. It's the same thing with guys getting girls. They think they need to go here to get girls. I'm like, dude, if you make yourself a badass dude, the girls will want to be with you by default, right? Versus you're chasing. So I think it always comes back to internal as well. Dude, crazy convo. I didn't know it would go down all these paths. If people want to learn more from you, find out more about you, get help from you, where can they find you?
Yeah, bro, this was fun. This was fun. It literally just finishes on, it kind of comes back to our conversation.
Yeah.
It's like you can come to a conversation and have notes and stuff, and that can provide like
a guideline,
direction. Okay, I want to make sure to touch these points, but at the same time, like if you're too attached to that, then you're going to miss the present moment. Like you're going to miss the conversation in front of you, and oftentimes like miss a big opportunity to go deeper into a subject. So I'm glad that we're really just open to flowing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
But yeah, bro, best place is probably on social, IG, jeremy.awakens. Microdosingmastermind.com is what I've been building the last 3 years. So that's
awesome.
The website for that. If people want to learn more. And yeah, bro, this was fun. I'm glad I'm glad we connected and made it happen. We're definitely gonna make some cool shit happen in Miami.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, man. I appreciate it.
Fuck yeah, homie.
Bro.